The courtroom was already full before sunrise. Reporters crowded the hallway. Camera flashes bounced off marble walls. People whispered one name over and over: Marcus Hale, billionaire, visionary, alleged murderer. He walked in without looking left or right. No expression, no hesitation, just a calm face behind guarded eyes. Across the room sat his wife, Evelyn Hale. Perfect posture, soft makeup, tears waiting in silence. She did not look at him, not once, because she was about to testify against him, and she was about to destroy everything he had built. If you enjoy slow-burn true crime stories where the truth hides behind power, loyalty, and betrayal, make sure you're subscribed, because this story will twist in ways you won't expect. Marcus Hale was not loud. He did not chase headlines. He built quietly, company after company, logistics, energy, technology, real estate, media, over 200 corporations under one holding empire. People called him disciplined. Some called him cold, but no one called him reckless. He lived structured days, early mornings, minimal public appearances, private charity work no one ever filmed. He was respected more than loved and feared more than he knew. Evelyn entered his life after tragedy. Marcus had already buried his first wife, a woman known for kindness, a woman his sons still mourned. Evelyn appeared 2 years later, elegant, soft-spoken, magnetic. She knew how to listen, how to mirror emotions, how to become exactly what someone needed. To Marcus, she seemed calm after grief. To outsiders, and she looked like perfection beside power. But perfection can be a mask, and Evelyn wore many. Kyle and Orion Hale, teenage boys forced to grow up fast. They respected their father deeply, but they never fully trusted Evelyn. They felt something missing. Not cruelty, not anger, just absence. She never truly bonded with them, never tried hard enough. And Marcus noticed, but he chose peace over confrontation, silence over tension. It was a decision that would cost him everything. Marcus had one friend he trusted completely: Adrian Cross, business partner, college roommate, brother in all but blood. Their families shared holidays, vacations, history. Adrian's son, Daniel Cross, grew up around Marcus's empire, a brilliant Harvard graduate student, curious, ambitious, naive enough to trust powerful people without fear. Marcus treated Daniel like a nephew, a future leader, someone meant to inherit influence through mentorship. Daniel trusted him completely. That trust would become a death sentence. Behind polished smiles, Evelyn lived another life. Private dinners with younger men, encrypted messages, luxury gifts hidden through shell accounts, affairs with Marcus's associates, men who admired power but craved shortcuts. She studied Marcus constantly, his habits, his routines, his vulnerabilities. She knew his silence was his greatest weakness. He avoided scandals, avoided public conflict, protected family image at all costs, and she planned to use that silence against him. Daniel Cross started asking questions about company structures, about ownership transfers, about legal signatures he did not understand. He wasn't suspicious, just curious. But curiosity threatened secrets Evelyn needed hidden. She met him privately several times. Friendly conversations, guidance disguised as mentorship. But Daniel noticed inconsistencies, financial movements that did not align with Marcus's reputation for clean operations. He began documenting quietly, unknowingly placing himself directly in danger. Daniel left campus after a late meeting. He texted a friend that he was meeting someone important. He never arrived home. His car was found 2 days later. Abandoned. Clean. No signs of struggle. The city froze in fear when his body was discovered. The murder was brutal, but the details were sealed quickly by investigators. Media focused on one narrative: corporate corruption, power struggles, billionaire enemies. And then something unexpected surfaced. Financial transfers linked to Marcus Hale's companies. Anonymous tips, encrypted emails, stories leaked to journalists overnight. The empire started to crack. Evelyn appeared before cameras with trembling hands. "I feared this day," she said softly. She spoke about Marcus's secret temper, his hidden pressure, his obsession with control. She hinted at dark business dealings. She cried at exactly the right moments. The nation watched in shock, because the most powerful testimony against Marcus came from inside his own home. His sons watched the broadcast in silence, confusion turning slowly into doubt. Marcus said nothing publicly, not even to defend himself. His silence allowed the narrative to grow, and Evelyn knew exactly what she was doing. Police arrived at dawn. No shouting, no chaos. Marcus opened the door calmly. He dressed himself. He walked out without resistance. Neighbors watched through windows. News helicopters filled the sky within minutes. The image went viral instantly. The billionaire in handcuffs. The empire's founder accused of orchestrating murder. And somewhere across the city, Evelyn watched the footage alone. No tears this time, only stillness. As Marcus sat in the interrogation room, detectives presented their evidence: financial trails, anonymous witness statements, private messages allegedly connected to him. But one detective noticed something unusual: too perfect, too clean, too carefully arranged, and outside the station. A young investigator reviewing surveillance footage paused on a frame. Evelyn Hale, meeting a man she claimed never to know. The story was about to change, but it was already too late to stop the collapse. As the husband is arrested, the wife becomes the star witness. The media builds a villain, and the first hidden clue suggests the truth may be far darker than anyone imagined. The courtroom felt colder than expected, not because of the air, because of the silence. Marcus Hale sat behind the defense table. Same calm posture, same unreadable face. But now, the world looked at him differently. Not as a builder, not as a leader, but as a suspect. Rows of reporters watched every movement. Jurors avoided eye contact. And across the aisle, Evelyn Hale prepared to speak. The prosecutor began slowly. Measured words, careful tone. He painted Marcus as a man who controlled everything: businesses, people, outcomes. He described Daniel Cross as a threat, a young man who discovered secrets inside a corporate empire, a liability that needed to disappear. Financial transfers appeared on screens, charts, phone records, anonymous testimony suggesting Marcus had motive. The room absorbed every detail, and Marcus remained silent. Kyle and Orion sat together, stiff, uncomfortable. They watched strangers describe their father as a monster. Each new accusation landed like a quiet explosion. They searched Marcus's face for reaction, for anger, for denial. But he gave nothing away, and silence can look like guilt when people want it to. Evelyn walked to the witness chair slowly. She paused before sitting, eyes wet, voice soft, controlled vulnerability. She spoke about changes in Marcus, late-night calls, private meetings, stress she claimed had turned into obsession. She described arguments no one else had witnessed, moments she claimed had frightened her. She never accused him directly of violence. She simply built a shadow around him. and shadows grow larger in silence. Then she described a private conversation. Marcus allegedly saying Daniel had become a problem. Gasps filled the room. Jurors leaned forward. The prosecutor let the silence stretch. Her words landed perfectly. Not too dramatic, just believable enough. Marcus's sons exchanged worried glances because they could not confirm or deny what happened behind closed doors. Outside the courthouse, the narrative hardened quickly. News banners labeled Marcus, cold billionaire under fire. Opinion shows debated corporate corruption. Former business rivals appeared on television. Some exaggerated stories. Some hinted at past conflicts. None offered direct proof. But public opinion rarely waits for proof. Inside a quiet office, investigator Jalen Rourke reviewed surveillance footage. He noticed Evelyn leaving a private restaurant late at night, weeks before Daniel's death. She sat with two men previously flagged in unrelated investigations. One worked security logistics, the other specialized in offshore financial structures. Both claimed no connection to Marcus. Rourke replayed the footage again and again. Something felt wrong. Marcus's legal team faced a difficult battle. Every accusation came from inside the marriage. Every financial trail appeared carefully documented. But none directly proved intent. Their strategy focused on inconsistencies, gaps in timelines, unverified anonymous sources. Yet public perception was already forming. And juries do not live outside public opinion. At home that night, Kyle spoke first. "What if we didn't know everything?" he whispered. Orion stayed silent. Memories played in their minds. Marcus's long hours, his emotional distance, his unwillingness to discuss business. Doubt is powerful when planted by someone you trust. And Evelyn had planted it carefully. Rourke traced financial records connected to Evelyn's shell accounts. Payments moved through layered structures, luxury purchases disguised as consulting fees, encrypted messaging services linked to younger associates. He began building a parallel timeline, one that did not include Marcus at the center, one that suggested a completely different architect, but proving it would require more than suspicion. More witnesses arrived: former employees, security contractors, analysts. Some testified to Marcus's strict leadership. Others hinted at hidden tensions. No one offered clear proof of violence, but the accumulation of doubt continued. And Evelyn sat quietly each day. Perfect posture, perfect timing, perfect control of the narrative. Late that evening, Rourke received a confidential call. A young man wanted to talk. He claimed to know Evelyn personally, claimed she paid people to keep secrets, and claimed Daniel Cross had uncovered something much bigger than corporate fraud. Rourke listened carefully, because if the young man told the truth, the entire trial would change direction. The wife dominates the courtroom. The sons begin to question their father. The media turns against Marcus, and one investigator starts uncovering a conspiracy hidden beneath grief and betrayal. The courtroom felt colder than expected, not because of the air, because of the silence. And Marcus Hale sat behind the defense table. Same calm posture, same unreadable face. But now the world looked at him differently, not as a builder, not as a leader, but as a suspect. Rows of reporters watched every movement. Jurors avoided eye contact. And across the aisle, Evelyn Hale prepared to speak. The prosecutor began slowly, measured words, careful tone. He painted Marcus as a man who controlled everything: businesses, people, outcomes. He described Daniel Cross as a threat, a young man who discovered secrets inside a corporate empire, a liability that needed to disappear. Financial transfers appeared on screens, charts, phone records, anonymous testimony suggesting Marcus had motive. The room absorbed every detail, and Marcus remained silent. Cale and Orion sat together, stiff, uncomfortable. They watched strangers describe their father as a monster. Each new accusation landed like a quiet explosion. They searched Marcus's face for reaction, for anger, for denial. But he gave nothing away, and silence can look like guilt when people want it to. Evelyn walked to the witness chair slowly. She paused before sitting, eyes wet, voice soft, controlled vulnerability. She spoke about changes in Marcus, late-night calls, private meetings, stress she claimed had turned into obsession. She described arguments no one else had witnessed, moments she claimed had frightened her. She never accused him directly of violence. She simply built a shadow around him, and shadows grow larger in silence. Then she described a private conversation, Marcus allegedly saying Daniel had become a problem. Gasps filled the room. Jurors leaned forward. The prosecutor let the silence stretch. Her words landed perfectly, not too dramatic, just believable enough. Marcus's sons exchanged worried glances, because they could not confirm or deny what happened behind closed doors. Outside the courthouse, the narrative hardened quickly. News banners labeled Marcus, cold billionaire under fire. Opinion shows debated corporate corruption. Former business rivals appeared on television. Some exaggerated stories. Some hinted at past conflicts. None offered direct proof. But public opinion rarely waits for proof. Inside a quiet office, investigator Jalen Rourke reviewed surveillance footage. He noticed Evelyn leaving a private restaurant late at night, weeks before Daniel's death. She sat with two men previously flagged in unrelated investigations. One worked security logistics, the other specialized in offshore financial structures. Both claimed no connection to Marcus. Rourke replayed the footage again and again. Something felt wrong. Marcus's legal team faced a difficult battle. Every accusation came from inside the marriage. Every financial trail appeared carefully documented, but none directly proved intent. Their strategy focused on inconsistencies, gaps in timelines, unverified anonymous sources. Yet public perception was already forming. And juries do not live outside public opinion. At home that night, Kyle spoke first. "What if we didn't know everything?" he whispered. Orion stayed silent. Memories played in their minds. Marcus's long hours, his emotional distance, his unwillingness to discuss business. Doubt is powerful when planted by someone you trust. And Evelyn had planted it carefully, and Rourke traced financial records connected to Evelyn's shell accounts. Payments moved through layered structures, luxury purchases disguised as consulting fees, encrypted messaging services linked to younger associates. He began building a parallel timeline, one that did not include Marcus at the center, one that suggested a completely different architect, but proving it would require more than suspicion. More witnesses arrived, former employees, security contractors, analysts. Some testified to Marcus's strict leadership. Others hinted at hidden tensions. No one offered clear proof of violence. But the accumulation of doubt continued. And Evelyn sat quietly each day. Perfect posture, perfect timing, perfect control of the narrative. Late that evening, Rourke received a confidential call. A young man wanted to talk. He claimed to know Evelyn personally, claimed she paid people to keep secrets, and claimed Daniel Cross had uncovered something much bigger than corporate fraud. Rourke listened carefully, because if the young man told the truth, the entire trial would change direction. The wife dominates the courtroom. The sons begin to question their father. The media turns against Marcus. And one investigator starts uncovering a conspiracy hidden beneath grief and betrayal. Investigator Jalen Rourke arrived early. No cameras, no official paperwork yet. Just a quiet meeting room and a nervous young man waiting inside. His name was Theo Marin, 24, former intern connected to several contractors under Marcus Hale's corporate umbrella. But Theo wasn't there to talk about Marcus. He was there to talk about Evelyn. His hands shook as he spoke. She paid people, he said quietly. Not directly, never directly, but I saw how the money moved. Rourke listened without interrupting, because Theo wasn't guessing, he was remembering. Theo described private events Evelyn hosted. Not charity galas, not public dinners, private gatherings with younger men, consultants, freelancers, security personnel, some connected loosely to Marcus's companies, others operating in legal gray zones. Theo admitted he originally believed she was networking, building influence. But after Daniel Cross started asking questions, the meetings changed. They became secretive. Encrypted messages replaced normal communication, and new faces appeared. Faces Theo later saw connected to Daniel's disappearance. Rourke opened financial records on his laptop. Theo pointed to specific shell accounts, the consulting firms with no physical offices, digital invoices that repeated identical language, funds moving in small amounts across multiple layers, nothing large enough to trigger automatic audits. But when combined, the total was enormous. And the final recipients? Security contractors with questionable histories, men who specialized in surveillance, extraction, and silence. While Rourke dug deeper, the trial continued. Evelyn remained the prosecution's strongest witness. She spoke about fear, about emotional distance, about subtle threats she claimed Marcus made during arguments. Her voice cracked at the right moments. Jurors watched with sympathy. And Marcus's silence continued to work against him, because people often believe the person who appears vulnerable. Marcus's lead attorney, Nyara Vance, received an anonymous email. They're encrypted. Short. Only one sentence. Look at Evelyn's offshore connections. Attached were fragments of financial routing documents, nothing definitive, but enough to spark new questions. Serena contacted Rourke privately. For the first time, law enforcement and defense quietly aligned. Not officially, but strategically. Rourke reviewed surveillance logs from a private marina. Nighttime footage, grainy, but clear enough. Evelyn stepping onto a yacht registered under a shell company. Two men greeting her. One later identified as a contractor suspected in Daniel's murder. The timestamp placed the meeting 3 days before Daniel disappeared. Rourke paused the video repeatedly. Each frame tightened the timeline. Each frame weakened the prosecution's narrative. Serena requested a private meeting with Cale and Orion. She showed them small pieces of evidence, not enough to prove innocence, but enough to introduce another possibility. What if your father isn't the one being hidden? She asked gently. What if someone else is? The boys exchanged uncertain looks, because for months they had lived inside Evelyn's version of truth, and now that version began to crack. Outside the courthouse, coverage intensified. Headlines speculated about secret business wars. Commentators debated Marcus's personality. Old interviews resurfaced. Every calm response from Marcus was framed as emotional coldness. Meanwhile, Evelyn received sympathy online. Thousands praised her bravery. Thousands believed her without hesitation. Public opinion moved faster than evidence ever could. Theo requested protection. He revealed one more detail. Or Evelyn often mentioned Daniel becoming too curious. She worried he might uncover financial movements she had hidden through Marcus's companies. Theo admitted he once overheard a private call. Evelyn speaking calmly, discussing how a problem needed to disappear without linking back to her. Rourke recorded everything carefully, but testimony alone was not enough. He needed physical proof. Serena filed a motion, requesting permission to investigate Evelyn's financial history. The prosecution objected immediately. They argued it was an attempt to intimidate a grieving witness. The judge hesitated, but granted limited access, because even in high-profile trials, truth demands space. Late at night, Rourke decrypted a hidden data drive recovered from one of Evelyn's associates. Inside were encrypted chat logs, these messages between Evelyn and multiple intermediaries. One message stood out. Make sure it points back to Marcus. He cannot fight publicly. Rourke leaned back slowly, because the story had just turned completely upside down. But revealing it too soon could destroy the investigation. And the trial was already halfway to a verdict. The investigator uncovers hidden payments. Secret meetings expose Evelyn's double life. The sons begin questioning their beliefs, and a single encrypted message suggests the entire murder was a carefully planned frame. By the fourth week, tension filled every seat. Jurors looked tired. Reporters looked hungry. The public expected a conclusion soon. The prosecution believed they were winning. Evelyn's testimony had shaped the narrative. Marcus still spoke very little. But behind the scenes, everything was changing. Nyara Vance stood slowly. Calm voice, measured pace. She requested permission to recall Evelyn to the stand. The courtroom murmured. The prosecution objected immediately. They argued the defense was trying to shame a grieving spouse. The judge paused, considered carefully, then allowed it, because new financial evidence had been submitted overnight, and the trial needed clarity. She walked confidently, same posture, same controlled breathing, same practiced vulnerability. But this time, Serena did not start with Marcus. She started with Evelyn's personal accounts, shell companies, consulting firms, private transfers disguised as event planning expenses. Evelyn smiled softly, claimed the accounts were for personal investments, claimed Marcus encouraged her independence. The jury nodded slightly, until Serena introduced timestamps, payments sent days before Daniel's disappearance, payments received by security contractors already mentioned in testimony. The room grew quiet. Serena asked a simple question. Did you meet these individuals privately before Daniel Cross died? Evelyn paused, only for a second, but the hesitation mattered. She answered carefully. Yes, social meetings, nothing more. Serena played surveillance footage, grainy but clear. Evelyn stepping onto the marina yacht, meeting two men she had just described as casual acquaintances. The prosecution objected loudly, but the judge allowed the clip to continue. The courtroom leaned forward, because the narrative had begun to shift. Meanwhile, investigator Rourke interrogated another contractor. Name, Leon Varick, security specialist. As known for discreet operations. At first, Leon denied everything. Then Rourke showed encrypted messages, payment confirmations, location pings matching Evelyn's movements. Leon's composure broke slowly, not with shouting, Not with drama, just a quiet collapse. He admitted he received money from intermediaries connected to Evelyn. He admitted surveillance work targeting Daniel. He claimed he believed it was corporate investigation, not murder. But he confirmed Evelyn gave direct instructions through coded language. Leon took the stand 2 days later. The room buzzed with anticipation. He described private meetings, encrypted phones, instructions that avoided names but made intentions clear. The prosecution tried to discredit him, called him unreliable, motivated by self-preservation. But Leon provided verifiable data: GPS logs, voice recordings, bank transfers, and every piece of evidence moved the spotlight away from Marcus. Cale and Orion watched in silence. Every new detail reshaped their memories. Conversations with Evelyn, her emotional warnings about Marcus, her subtle attempts to isolate them from their father. The boys began seeing patterns they had ignored before, not because they were blind, but because grief and fear make manipulation easier. That night, they visited Marcus in custody. For the first time since the arrest, they believed he might truly be innocent. Marcus said little, just one sentence. Truth takes time. News coverage shifted carefully. Headlines softened. Questions replaced accusations. Some commentators apologized publicly for early assumptions. Others doubled down on speculation. Social media exploded with divided opinions, and some called Evelyn a victim under attack. Others began calling her the architect of a conspiracy. The public story fractured into uncertainty, and uncertainty is dangerous for anyone built on control. The prosecution introduced new witnesses, former employees describing Marcus's strict leadership, emails showing business pressure, internal memos highlighting intense deadlines. But none of it connected directly to Daniel's death. And now the jury had seen something new, a possible alternative mastermind, one who sat quietly in the courtroom each day. Late one evening, Rourke unlocked the final layer of Evelyn's encrypted archive. Inside was a private voice memo. Her voice, calm, calculated, discussing how Marcus's reputation for silence would prevent him from defending himself publicly. And in one final sentence, he will take the fall because he refuses to fight dirty. Rourke stared at the recording, because this was not just manipulation, it was premeditation. And once it reached the courtroom, everything would change. Evelyn's financial secrets surface, an accomplice confirms hidden operations. The sons begin believing their father again, and a private recording threatens to collapse the entire prosecution. The courtroom felt different that morning, not louder, just heavier. Jurors spoke less to each other. Reporters whispered instead of rushing, because rumors had spread overnight. New evidence, a private recording, something powerful enough to shake the entire trial. Evelyn entered with her usual calm, but her eyes scanned the room more carefully than before. She sensed the change. Nyara Vance stood slowly. She requested permission to introduce newly authenticated audio evidence. The prosecution objected immediately. They called it prejudicial. They questioned its origin. The judge reviewed the material privately. Minutes passed like hours. Then came the ruling. The recording would be allowed, and the courtroom held its breath. The speakers crackled softly. Then Evelyn's voice filled the room. Calm, cold, strategic. She discussed Marcus's refusal to fight publicly. She spoke about shaping narratives, about ensuring the blame would settle on him. Not direct admission of murder, but unmistakable intention to manipulate perception. Jurors exchanged shocked glances. Even reporters stopped typing, because the woman who had cried on the stand now sounded calculating and precise. Serena approached the witness stand. "Mrs. Hale, is that your voice?" Evelyn hesitated longer than before. "Yes," she answered finally. She claimed the recording was taken out of context, claimed she spoke hypothetically, claimed she feared Marcus's corporate enemies. But Serena presented timestamps, messages linked to the same conversation, financial transfers made within hours of the recording. The cracks widened, and for the first time, Evelyn looked uncertain. The prosecutor attempted to reframe the narrative. He argued Evelyn had been manipulated, that contractors acted without her knowledge, that she feared Marcus and spoke defensively. But the courtroom energy had shifted. The jury no longer watched Marcus as the only possible villain. They watched Evelyn with growing suspicion, and suspicion changes how every word is heard. Leon Varick was recalled to the stand, this time with additional evidence. Encrypted chat logs decoded fully, payment authorizations signed through layered accounts, instructions referencing the final night. He described surveillance patterns that tracked Daniel's movements. He confirmed Evelyn provided schedules through intermediaries. The prosecution tried to discredit him again, but this time, physical proof supported his claims. GPS data, digital timestamps, voice fragments matching Evelyn's recorded conversations. During a recess, Kyle and Orion approached Evelyn privately. Their voices were quiet, but their questions were sharp. "Did you lie about Dad?" Kyle asked. She tried to comfort them, tried to redirect blame toward Marcus's business world. But the boys no longer looked convinced. Trust had begun to crumble, and Evelyn could feel control slipping away. Her headlines changed rapidly. Star witness under scrutiny. New evidence suggests alternate mastermind. Commentators revisited earlier assumptions. Some apologized publicly, others accused investigators of bias. But one thing became clear. The narrative of a cold billionaire killing to protect secrets was no longer the only story. And once doubt enters public opinion, it spreads fast. The prosecution introduced psychological experts. They argued Evelyn's voice on the recording reflected trauma responses. They suggested she exaggerated fear to cope with emotional abuse. But cross-examination exposed inconsistencies. No documented history of violence, no police reports, no medical evidence, just carefully constructed emotional storytelling. And jurors began recognizing the difference between pain and performance. Late that evening, an investigator Rourke discovered one final piece, a deleted email chain recovered from an overseas server. Evelyn communicating directly with the person who arranged the final meeting with Daniel Cross. No intermediaries, no coded language, just clear instructions. And one chilling line. Make sure Marcus appears connected when everything ends. Rourke closed the laptop slowly, because the next day in court, the perfect witness would become the prime suspect. The recording destroys Evelyn's image. The accomplice confirms direct involvement. The sons begin to see the truth, and new emails reveal Evelyn may have orchestrated the entire conspiracy. No one spoke loudly that day. Reporters lined the walls earlier than usual. Security presence doubled, because overnight, everything changed. New evidence had been filed. Direct communication between Evelyn Hale and the individuals linked to Daniel Cross's final movements. The prosecution looked tense. The defense looked prepared. And Evelyn arrived wearing the same calm expression. But calm can hide panic. The prosecutor opened cautiously. He tried to maintain the original narrative. Marcus as the powerful man with motive. Marcus as the silent architect. But jurors no longer leaned forward with certainty. They listened with hesitation, because doubt had already entered the room. And doubt is louder than any argument. Nyara Vance introduced recovered email threads. Digital authentication confirmed. Server timestamps verified by independent analysts. The judge allowed the jury to view excerpts. Evelyn communicating directly with the coordinator who arranged Daniel's final meeting. No intermediaries. No confusion. She discussed timing, location, visibility, and one message changed the energy completely. Make sure the financial trail circles back to Marcus. Gasps echoed softly across the courtroom. Evelyn's attorney objected, but the words had already landed. For the first time, the prosecution requested a recess, not the defense, not the judge, the prosecution. Outside the courtroom, reporters sensed the turning tide. Headlines began changing again. Star witness under investigation. Billionaire case takes shocking turn. Public opinion fractured further. Some refused to believe Evelyn capable of such manipulation. Others began questioning everything she had said. When court resumed, Serena made a risky decision. She called Marcus Hale to the stand. The courtroom fell silent. He walked slowly, sat calmly, swore the oath, and spoke for the first time publicly. His voice was steady, low, controlled. He described his relationship with Daniel as mentorship. He admitted he suspected Evelyn's infidelity, but chose silence to protect family stability. He explained why he avoided public defense after the arrest. I believed truth would surface through evidence, he said quietly. I refused to fight with lies. The room listened differently now, not as observers of a villain, but as witnesses to a man who had been quiet too long. Cale and Orion sat still. Every word reshaped their understanding. They remembered conversations Evelyn had twisted, moments Marcus had chosen peace over confrontation. They realized silence had not been guilt. It had been restraint. And restraint can look like weakness when surrounded by manipulation. During a short recess, O'Rourke received confirmation from international authorities. Offshore bank accounts linked directly to Evelyn had funded the contractors who tracked Daniel. The payment chain was complete. No missing links, no unexplained gaps, just a clear financial map leading back to her. Rourke delivered the report to Serena immediately, because once introduced, the courtroom would face an undeniable reality. Serena constructed a visual timeline: Evelyn's secret meetings, payments, encrypted calls, Daniel's growing suspicions, the final meeting, the murder, and the planted financial trail pointing toward Marcus. The presentation was calm, precise, devastating, because every piece fit perfectly together, not as speculation, but as structure. The prosecutor attempted one final argument. He suggested Evelyn acted under fear, manipulated by others, emotionally unstable after years of marriage strain. But cross-examination revealed contradictions. Luxury purchases continued during the conspiracy, secret vacations with accomplices, carefully planned financial moves that required cold calculation. Fear did not explain precision, and jurors noticed. As the day ended, the judge addressed the court, based on new evidence. An independent investigation into Evelyn Hale would begin immediately. She was no longer just a witness. She was now a subject of active criminal inquiry. Security officers approached quietly, not to arrest her yet, but to restrict movement. And for the first time since the trial began, Evelyn looked directly at Marcus. Her calm mask cracked. Only for a second, but everyone saw it. The prosecution loses its narrative. Marcus finally tells his side. If financial trails confirm Evelyn's involvement, and the star witness becomes the center of a criminal investigation. The courthouse steps were silent that morning. Not the loud chaos from earlier weeks. No shouting crowds, no confident headlines, only quiet cameras waiting for confirmation of what everyone already felt. The story had shifted, and people were no longer asking whether Marcus was guilty. They were asking how long Evelyn had controlled the narrative. She arrived under heavier security. No smile this time. No eye contact with reporters. Just a straight walk through the doors that once welcomed her as the star witness. Inside the courtroom, tension sat like a weight. The judge announced the development carefully. An independent investigative panel had reviewed the financial evidence overnight. The offshore accounts, the communication logs, the coordinated timeline, and based on preliminary findings, Evelyn Hale was now formally under criminal investigation for conspiracy and obstruction. Gasps spread across the room. Some reporters stopped typing. They just stared. Because the trial was no longer about one suspect. It was about a complete reversal. The prosecutor stood slowly. His tone had changed. No longer confident, no longer aggressive. He requested time to reassess charges against Marcus. That single request changed the entire atmosphere. Because when a prosecutor hesitates, jurors listen differently. Serena remained calm. She said nothing. She let the silence speak for itself. Evelyn's attorney objected repeatedly, but the judge allowed limited questioning. Serena stepped forward. Her voice was quiet, controlled. She asked Evelyn about the encrypted messages, about the payments, about the meetings with Daniel days before his death. Evelyn answered carefully. She claimed business consulting, personal safety concerns, misunderstood financial transfers. But each answer collided with documented timestamps, verified travel records, witness confirmations, and the cracks widened. Kyle watched his mother speak. He searched for the familiar confidence, the emotional conviction. But something felt rehearsed. Orion noticed it too. The pauses, the contradictions, the moments where she avoided direct answers. For the first time, they did not feel torn between parents. They felt betrayed by the story they had been taught. And that realization hurt more than any courtroom accusation. Rourke entered quietly. No dramatic entrance. Just a folder full of timelines and financial chains. He explained how payments moved through shell companies, how encrypted calls aligned with Daniel's final schedule, how surveillance teams were hired weeks before the meeting that ended his life. Every detail was precise, every statement backed by documentation. No speculation, no emotion, only structure. And structure is hard to deny. Then Serena introduced the final communication, a voice recording recovered from a seized device. The judge allowed a short excerpt. Evelyn's voice discussed ensuring Daniel didn't complicate future negotiations. No threats, no graphic words, but the implication was clear. Silence filled the room. Even the defense attorney paused before objecting, because everyone heard it. By late afternoon, the prosecutor made an unexpected statement. He requested the court consider dismissing key allegations against Marcus pending further review. A murmur spread instantly, because that was not a small adjustment. That was an admission that the original case had been compromised. Marcus sat still. No celebration, no anger, only quiet relief. During recess, Kale and Orion approached their mother privately. No cameras nearby, only a hallway and years of unanswered questions. They asked her directly. Did she manipulate them? Did she lie about Marcus? Did she hide Daniel's involvement? Evelyn tried to maintain control. She said they did not understand business pressures. She said adults make complicated choices, but they did not see truth in her eyes. Only fear, and fear is difficult to hide from your own children. As evening approached, investigators returned with an update, and formal charges would be prepared. Conspiracy, financial manipulation, obstruction of justice. The judge announced the court would reconvene for a hearing addressing Evelyn's legal status. Security moved closer to her seat. Not aggressive, but unmistakable. The empire she had built was collapsing piece by piece. When court adjourned, Marcus stood slowly. He looked toward his sons, not asking for forgiveness, not demanding loyalty, just offering a calm nod. And for the first time, they nodded back, not because everything was healed, but because truth had finally broken through the noise. Outside, reporters shouted new headlines. Star witness faces criminal charges. Billionaire trial turns into historic legal reversal. And as Evelyn was escorted out under supervision, the cameras captured something no one had seen before. Not power, not confidence, only the realization that control had finally ended. Charges shift. Truth surfaces publicly. The sons confront reality, and the courtroom prepares for the final legal battle. The courtroom filled earlier than usual. No empty seats, no casual observers, only journalists, analysts, and people who understood history might be written that day. The air felt different, less chaotic, more serious, because the story was no longer speculation. It was consequences. Marcus entered quietly. No dramatic gestures, no attempt to greet the cameras, just a calm walk to his seat. His sons followed behind him. Not distant anymore, not divided, they sat beside him. And that simple choice told the public more than any speech ever could. Moments later, Evelyn entered under escort. No luxury wardrobe, no confident stride, and only controlled movements and guarded eyes. The woman who once commanded attention now tried to avoid it, and the courtroom noticed everything. The judge spoke with firm precision. No long introductions, no emotional commentary, only facts. The court would hear final legal arguments regarding Marcus Hale's remaining charges, and it would also consider the new evidence linking Evelyn Hale to the broader conspiracy. No applause, no reactions allowed. But tension rose anyway, because everyone knew the outcome would reshape lives and possibly destroy reputations built over decades. The prosecutor stood slowly. His voice lacked the confidence from earlier weeks. He acknowledged procedural failures. He admitted investigative bias. He explained that the original narrative had relied heavily on Evelyn's testimony, and a testimony now under serious question. He attempted to maintain some structure. He argued that Marcus still benefited financially from certain business arrangements, but the argument sounded weak, disconnected from the new evidence. Even the jurors leaned back, not defensive, just unconvinced, and the prosecutor seemed to know it. Serena rose without hesitation. Her voice remained steady, measured, clear. She did not attack the prosecution personally. She attacked assumptions. She walked the jury through every false narrative, every manipulated timeline, every emotional testimony that collapsed under facts. She showed how Marcus had been framed using trust and access. She showed how silence had been misinterpreted as guilt. She reminded the jury that power makes people targets, and she asked one final question. Do we punish a man because someone else controlled the story? No dramatic pause, no shouting, just truth presented like a mirror. And the courtroom felt it. During recess, Kyle and Orion sat together. No arguments, no tension. They reviewed notes. They replayed testimony in their heads. They remembered the early days of the trial, the doubt, the anger, the fear. Now those emotions felt heavy with regret. But their father never demanded apologies. He never asked them to choose sides, and that quiet strength reshaped how they saw him. When Marcus returned from a private meeting with Serena, Cale placed a hand on his shoulder, a small gesture, but louder than any courtroom declaration. Evelyn's attorney attempted to salvage credibility. He argued that recorded statements were taken out of context. He suggested financial transfers were misunderstood consulting payments. He claimed emotional stress influenced her previous testimony, but the evidence stack was too large. Encrypted messages, surveillance logs, payment routes, witness confirmations. Even neutral observers began shifting away from her narrative. Evelyn sat quietly. No dramatic outbursts, no emotional appeals, only a slow realization that her influence had vanished. The jury left the room in silence. No expressions, no hints. Just 12 individuals carrying the weight of a national story. The weight felt endless. Reporters refreshed updates constantly. Analysts debated outcomes on live broadcasts. But inside the courthouse, everything felt still. Marcus sat with his sons. No discussions about victory, only quiet conversations about life beyond the trial. Outside the building, crowds gathered again, not to accuse, not to celebrate, but to witness the end of a story that had consumed the nation. Hours later, the jury returned. Everyone stood. The courtroom felt too small for the moment. The judge instructed silence. The foreperson held the verdict paper, and the words came slowly, measured, clear. On the remaining charges against Marcus Hale, not guilty, no cheers allowed, but the emotional shift was immediate. Kyle closed his eyes. Orion exhaled deeply. Marcus did not celebrate. He simply nodded once. Relief without arrogance, freedom without triumph. Because victory did not erase what the family had endured. The judge continued. Based on new evidence and ongoing investigations, Evelyn Hale would remain in custody pending trial for conspiracy, obstruction, and financial manipulation. The room reacted differently this time. Not shock, not excitement, just a heavy understanding that accountability had arrived. Evelyn's posture changed slightly. No arguments, no resistance, only quiet acceptance. The narrative she built had turned against her. When Marcus exited, cameras flashed again. Reporters shouted questions, but he offered only one short statement. The truth does not need revenge. No accusations, no speeches about betrayal, just a calm message. His sons stood beside him, not behind, not separate, together. And that image traveled across every news outlet within minutes. A family rebuilt in silence. That evening, Marcus returned home. The house felt different, less tense, less guarded. He walked through rooms that once felt heavy with suspicion. Now, they felt open again. Kyle and Orion joined him on the balcony. No dramatic speeches, just shared quiet. The city lights stretched into the distance, and for the first time in months, none of them talked about the trial. They talked about the future, because the verdict had closed one chapter, but the consequences of betrayal would continue unfolding. Some wounds would take years to heal. Some relationships would never recover. And one final courtroom battle still remained. Not for Marcus, but for the woman who tried to control everything. The courtroom looked familiar, but the roles had changed. Evelyn Hale no longer sat beside lawyers as a protected witness. She sat alone at the defense table. No press conferences, no confident smiles, only controlled silence. Reporters watched closely, because the woman who once shaped public opinion now faced questions she could not avoid. And then the audience came for one reason. They wanted to understand how power turned into manipulation. The prosecutor spoke carefully. No dramatic language, no personal attacks, only timelines, financial movements, communication records. He explained how narratives were crafted, how evidence was selectively revealed, how emotional testimony influenced investigators before facts were verified. He did not describe violence. He described strategy, a strategy built on control. And for the first time, Evelyn listened without interrupting, because every word was backed by documentation. Her attorney attempted to reframe everything. He described her as a business strategist under pressure, a woman trying to protect family assets, a professional forced into complicated decisions. He argued that success attracts enemies, that powerful people become easy targets. Some jurors listened carefully, others studied the evidence, because sympathy alone could not erase digital records, and every argument faced the same obstacle: facts that refused to disappear. A former corporate advisor took the stand. Calm voice, measured tone. He explained how Evelyn requested private investigations into business partners, how surveillance contracts were arranged, how communication channels were hidden from official records. He did not speculate. He presented emails, invoices, schedules. Each document confirmed planning that extended months before the public scandal began. The courtroom remained quiet, because preparation changes how people interpret outcomes. Cale and Orion attended every session, not as witnesses, not as commentators, just as sons trying to understand their own history. They listened to conversations they never knew existed, private deals, hidden agreements, manipulated narratives presented to them as truth. Sometimes they left the courtroom early, not from anger, from exhaustion, because learning new versions of your past is heavy, and healing does not happen in one day. Serena appeared again, this time not defending Marcus, but explaining how investigative procedures were influenced. She showed how early evidence was overshadowed by emotional testimony, how pressure from media shaped prosecutorial urgency, how selective leaks created a narrative before trials even began. Her tone remained calm. No revenge, no personal attacks, just structure, just clarity. And the courtroom respected her consistency. Investigators presented encrypted messages, not dramatic, not emotional, but revealing patterns, discussions about controlling public perception, instructions to delay certain disclosures, plans to position Marcus as the primary suspect in business disputes. Each message carried timestamps, verified devices, independent authentication. Evelyn's defense argued context, but repetition created a larger picture, a strategy that relied on influence instead of transparency. Eventually, Evelyn chose to testify. Her voice remained composed. She described ambition, fear of losing control, pressure from corporate rivals. She insisted she never intended harm. She said she believed she was protecting her family and empire. Some jurors nodded slightly, others watched closely for inconsistencies. She admitted to shaping narratives, but she denied criminal conspiracy. And that distinction became the center of the entire trial. The prosecutor asked simple questions, direct timelines, specific financial transfers, clear communication excerpts. He did not raise his voice. He allowed Evelyn to explain. But every explanation met a contradiction. Documents versus memory. Statements versus recorded instructions. Moments where her confidence weakened. Not dramatic breakdowns, just small pauses, small hesitations, and those moments carried weight. During a long recess, Cale and Orion met their mother privately. No cameras, no lawyers speaking for them. Only difficult questions. Why manipulate the narrative? Why involve them emotionally? Why let them believe their father was dangerous? Evelyn struggled to answer directly. She spoke about control, fear of losing influence, the belief that outcomes justified strategy. But for the first time, her sons did not argue. They listened, and they realized something painful. Sometimes the people who hurt us believe they are protecting us, and that does not erase consequences. Closing arguments arrived sooner than expected. The prosecution focused on patterns, repeated decisions, deliberate concealment. The defense focused on intention, ambition without criminal purpose, complex business conflicts, human mistakes. The judge reminded jurors to focus on evidence, not emotion, not reputation, only verifiable actions. And with that, the jury left the courtroom. Days passed slowly. Public debates filled television panels. Some believed Evelyn was a mastermind. Others believed she was a strategist who crossed ethical lines without criminal intent. Marcus stayed away from media. He focused on rebuilding relationships with his sons. Family dinners returned. Conversations felt honest, but unfinished, because closure required one final answer. When the jury finally returned, the courthouse felt silent again. The judge prepared to read the decision. Evelyn sat still. No visible emotion. Kyle and Orion held each other's hands quietly, not choosing sides, just preparing for reality. The verdict paper rested on the desk, and as the courtroom stood, everyone understood that this decision would not only close a legal chapter, it would define how history remembered the empire she built. Truth reaches its final test. Family bonds face their hardest moment, and the empire stands on the edge of its ultimate judgment. The courtroom stood in silence. No whispers, no moving chairs, and only the faint sound of paper unfolding. The judge's voice was calm, measured, unemotional. The jury had reached a unanimous decision on multiple counts of conspiracy, obstruction, and financial manipulation. Evelyn Hale was found guilty. There was no dramatic reaction, no shouting, no chaos, only a long exhale that seemed to move through the room like wind, because everyone understood what this meant, not only for Evelyn, but for the empire she tried to control. Evelyn did not cry. She did not shout. She sat still, her face unreadable, but her hands tightened slowly on the table. Her attorney whispered quietly beside her. Security officers moved closer, not aggressively, just firmly. The same woman who once commanded press conferences and shaped public narratives now faced consequences she could not redirect. And then for the first time, the cameras did not chase her voice. They recorded her silence. Kyle closed his eyes. Orion looked at the floor. They did not celebrate. They did not smile. Because victory did not feel like victory. It felt like the end of an illusion. Their father placed a hand on each of their shoulders. No speeches, no dramatic gestures, just presence. And that small moment carried more weight than the verdict itself. Because family healing rarely arrives with applause. It arrives quietly. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Microphones stretched forward. Questions collided in the air. Marcus paused briefly. He looked at the cameras, then at his sons, and finally spoke. He said justice is not revenge. He said truth takes patience. He said families survive through honesty, not perfection. No attacks, no bitterness. And then he stepped away and refused every follow-up interview. Because some stories end best without extended explanations. News headlines changed overnight. From corporate tyrant on trial to historic legal reversal exposes manipulated narrative. Commentators debated media responsibility. Legal analysts reviewed investigative mistakes. Viewers reflected on how easily perception can be shaped. Some apologized publicly for early judgments. Others remained skeptical. But one thing became clear. Public opinion had been driven by emotion before evidence, and that realization made many uncomfortable. Inside Marcus's companies, changes began immediately. Transparency policies strengthened. Independent oversight increased. Internal investigations reviewed past decisions, not to erase history, but to prevent future manipulation. And Marcus stepped back from daily operations. He allowed new leaders to emerge, because survival is not only about clearing your name, it is about rebuilding trust, step by step. Weeks later, she stood before the court again. No elaborate defense, no attempts to control the narrative. She spoke quietly. She admitted ambition blinded her. She admitted fear of losing power shaped her decisions. She did not ask for sympathy. She asked only for her sons to live freely from her mistakes. The judge listened carefully, then delivered a sentence that reflected the scale of manipulation. Firm, clear, final. And with that, the legal chapter ended. Months passed. Marcus and his sons traveled quietly. No public announcements, no media coverage. They visited places connected to their late mother, shared stories long left unspoken. Sometimes they argued. Sometimes they sat in silence. But slowly, trust rebuilt itself. Not perfectly, not completely, but honestly. And honesty is the strongest foundation after betrayal. Law schools studied the trial. Journalists reviewed early reporting failures. Investigators changed procedures to prevent narrative bias. The story became a lesson, not only about crime, but about perception, about how power and emotion can shape reality before facts emerge, and about the responsibility carried by those who control information. One evening, long after the headlines faded, Marcus stood alone in his office, city lights reflecting across glass walls. He looked at old photographs, his first wife, his young sons, the years before the empire grew complicated. He did not erase Evelyn's pictures. He placed them in a box, not to forget, but to acknowledge that even painful chapters are part of truth. Kale and Orion entered quietly. They asked about the future. He smiled softly and said, "The empire was never about wealth. It was about family learning to survive storms together." Outside, the city moved on. New stories replaced old ones. But for those who lived through it, the lesson remained clear. Power without honesty destroys itself, and truth, no matter how delayed, eventually finds its voice. The verdict closes the courtroom, the family begins real healing, and the empire transforms from control into resilience.